Welcome to the Not Just Ad Show, where B2B brands discover how creator-led content drives pipeline, builds trust, and grows long-term brand equity. Each episode, we speak with business leaders, founders, and creators who are defining their categories. I'm your host, Marcus Sherwin, and this is the creator economy for B2B. Hello and welcome today to Not Just Ads, the creator economy for B2B. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Andrew Hall. Andrew has a seasoned career across a number of roles. He's currently leads VP demand generation at Canto. Previously, he had a number of senior roles in Adobe, and previously he led his own managing director of his own agency in South Africa, Hero Digital. I'm delighted to have him on the show today. We're going to be talking a really interesting category, digital asset management, which is a really exciting category that it's grown. Canto is one of the leaders in the space, and I'm really looking forward to getting into the conversation. Andrew, thanks a lot for joining us on the show.
Marcus, great to be here. Looking forward to the conversation. I hope it's useful for your listeners.
Great. Maybe we could walk back a little bit from kind of where you began your career. You led Hero Digital back in South Africa, from where you're from originally. How do you think, like, from running a digital agency for the number of years that you were there, how do you think things have changed? Anything that's changed since you began in the sector versus where it is today? Your perspective, maybe I'll rephrase it actually. In your opinion, what has not changed, I suppose, because a lot has changed, obviously, but like, what are the things that you think like that are still very valuable today as they were then, despite all the change that we've seen over the last number of years?
Yeah, very quickly, very small points of clarification. I didn't own the company. I was privileged to be the MD for 7 years, and I worked in the company for 15 years. I was a shareholder, and it was an incredible 15-year journey. I was probably a fairly young MD as well, but I learned a lot, and I often look out for ex-agency people when I'm hiring because of how difficult the world of ad agencies are. And so I think, one thing that hasn't changed certainly is my respect for those that are in that part of the world and part of the creative content generation world. I think a huge thing, which is even more important now, is breakthrough creative and to get to a place to create really good content that resonates with your prospects, your target market, etc. We're going to talk about content operations, etc. But I think the biggest thing that hasn't changed is the world requires great breakthrough creative to land the right messages at the right time. One of the things that has changed, and I am very glad that I'm no longer struggling with that in an agency world, is AI. That's huge. I mean, I left the agency world before the real onset of AI. I've still got really good friends that work within that world. I still engage with a lot of our agency customers. That's a really tough balancing act. My view, if I go back to what hasn't changed, is that now more than ever, I believe really strong content, unique content that actually resonates is critical. And there's a really interesting balancing act between AI-driven content versus breakthrough content, and where does that partnership lie and where does that balance sit? So what hasn't changed? Agency's a tough place. The operational side of things requires real thought process. It requires implementation of digital structuring that allows for top-line growth without damaging net profitability, but it still remains a critical part of the content world we live in.
It's definitely so. Hero Digital was that an agency focusing on like kind of the broad scale scope of digital, or was it specifically on creative and the creative aspect?
Yeah, so we operated across Africa. We had a few UK clients as well. We were a full-service B2B agency. We specialized in digital development and things like that, but we looked after the full gambit from strategy, concept, delivery, creative campaigns. In many ways, a lot of what I do now on the other side, on the brand side, but we looked after the full thing, right? So, how do we understand the requirements of the organization to go and drive a certain outcome? And we would deliver a full-service, multi-channel campaign that was very measurable against revenue, lead generation, and all those good things. We were a specialist B2B agency rather than above the line. And so, yeah, we were full service, but we had a very strong digital aspect to it with very big digital development teams as well.
It's interesting. I think I saw a quote that's probably about a year ago by Rory Sutherland, and I'm paraphrasing it now, but he was just kind of saying that what's technology is enabled to do is like kind of scale, but it hasn't scaled the creative aspect, and that's what makes the value in creativity with agencies. I'm paraphrasing the quote. You've probably seen it yourself somewhere, but it seems even with AI and stuff, there's a huge amount of capability for admin and even creativity, but do you see it of like if you outsource that to an algorithm, that sooner or later everything looks a bit bland and the same, and there is like a value there for agencies still, whether it's like vinyl making a comeback or artisan making or things like that. Do you kind of see like the agency world as a kind of a counterbalance to AI? There may actually be a resurgence in terms of actually going very specific to very specific agencies that are really really good at a certain thing.
So a couple of there's a lot to unpack in that question. A couple of things to be very clear. I remain hugely passionate about the industry. I love being involved. I think one of the biggest challenges is and I was on the commercial side of the agency, not the creative side. As much as I longed to be in the creative studio, that wasn't my talent. One of the biggest challenges that I see in agency, I certainly had this firsthand, was ensuring really good creative work is built properly, and that although you might be growing your top line revenue, that you're not damaging or putting yourselves in a very precarious net profitability space, right? And I experienced that. And it's also been an age-old problem in agency world that commercial balancing is difficult. Why is that relevant to your question? Because I don't think there's a resurgence. I think there is a heightened need for good creative, but I do think that you need fundamental digital infrastructure to be able to ensure that automated work is done potentially by tools, and that's where AI comes from. Certainly where dams come in, things like work management, that you have an infrastructure that allows you the time and clarity to get really good creative work done, to ensure that it's built correctly, that your input is recognized with the output of billing because it's a commercial venture, right? And then where you can add in automated technology that allows you to bill without human engagement, I think that's going to become critical. So the flux that I see agencies in at the moment is how do they build what I would call like digital operational resilience that allows for this time and space to do work that's breakthrough, that is absolutely makes them stand out away from this what I would term AI slop. But actually there's a very strong place for automated AI generative content that I think can be built for without the heavy overhead. And so to be able to get that right, you need a strategy, you need a digital architecture that allows your business to operate in the way you need, and you need to be able to have clarity and data to understand where to bill, how to bill, what your profit margins are, where your profit and loss centers are, and then to be able to have very data-driven, objective conversations with your clients or your customers. That's critical. And what I often see is agencies are incredibly hardworking, go and get things done. And the creative's excellence, but it's often not backed up with the operational ability to have a business-like conversation to ensure sustainability and growth over time.
It makes a lot of sense. One of the interesting things that I noticed as well in the B2B world with big brands, that there's this trend, and some large brands that I spoke with, they brought a lot of like their agency, not everything, but a certain substantial amount of it in-house, and they created their own in-house agency. And one of the things that the feedback that I got from speaking to different people there, they were saying the efficiency is great, it costs us less, but one thing that we really miss is that we don't get visibility of what's going on now in the market, what's new, what's happening. And I think agencies are at a unique position to be able to have visibility that a client will just have the internal visibility. Yes, they go to events and stuff, but if you're meeting with your agency every week and they're working with another roster of clients, maybe not direct competitors, they're able to kind of give you some insight without obviously breaking NDAs or anything like that, but on industry trends that you don't necessarily have that if you just have it all in-house. I don't know if you found that as well, of like the ability of AI should really in turn be able to help them kind of elevate the conversation so that a lot of the admin and kind of like the general stuff before that couldn't have been automated, that can be now, but to actually add real value in terms of what's going on in the industry and how they should be looking ahead at things.
Again, fascinating question, and this could be a far longer conversation. I work with a lot of in-house agencies. I consulted to the in-house space in that kind of transition out of the agency world. There's a couple of things here. One is the better together story is the one that wins all the time. There's also a slight misnomer that bringing things in-house makes it cheaper, and that damages the in-house ability, if I'm honest. Like, I'm not a huge fan of working with brands because the board said let's bring it internally to save cost. I don't believe that's the right approach, and very seldom is it cheaper. Yes, there's definitely efficiency and specialization. And so what you do bring with in-house is the ability to really understand the product, the brand, like real specialization. But the ability for an in-house to work with a trusted or trusted partners is an incredible outcome when that works. And that's when you start to get the best of both worlds. And so my encouragement towards agencies on the one side is embrace the in-house space to be able to work together. It shouldn't be an either or, it should be. And then the last one on AI efficiency, we need to be very careful that AI efficiency doesn't end up in AI chaos. And so we can't just plug in AI tools and magically wave a wand and everything's done, right? The potential risk, brand damage, poor creative, misguided communication at scale is a real threat. And so we need to be really careful around how do we engage in this AI delivery to ensure it's right. If you get it right, the scale and automation and autonomy is amazing. If you get it wrong, you run some real risks. And if you then start going into kind of legislative environments like pharma or financial services, I would be very careful around how you implement AI from a scale perspective.
There's definitely a lot of risk, I think, especially the larger the organization with data or anything like that. I think with agents, and if you don't have the guardrails in place, it seems like it's a very risky to completely automate everything. I'd love to talk with you a little bit about, you've worked on both sides. So you've worked on the agency side for a number of years, and then you were in Adobe for a number of years. What do you think are the biggest learnings from, and now obviously in Canto as well, what do you think are the biggest learnings from being on the agency side? You're partnering with clients, and then being in a large tech like Adobe. Any kind of key things that you see in terms of like how the business operates, learnings in terms of the transition of what you would see? What are some of the observations that you had when you made that transition?
It's two very different worlds. And the agency world teaches you a lot about resilience, teaches you a lot about agility, and thinking creatively. And so, as I mentioned earlier, I often look for ex-agency people because I think they make great hirings. They certainly know how to work hard. Doesn't mean that brand side doesn't. I think I might be working longer hours now than I was in agency, which is interesting. But the biggest learning I have on the brand side is the understanding and appreciation for good creative work, right? The basics of marketing, I would say. How do we understand what resonates with our target market, with our prospects? How do we get creative that breakthroughs in a world where mobile phones are dominating, where attention spans are short, where pressure's on in industries, especially the ones we sell to, in Adobe and Workfront were the same. How do you understand how multifaceted, multi-channeled campaigns start to work towards driving engagement, lead volume, etc., that actually then ends up in closing business? So on the one side, an agency, that creative appreciation, the understanding of multifaceted and multi-channel campaigns is great. On the brand side, the biggest learning I've had is how does that turn into commercial value? And so, I love the agency space. I don't think often they're in a position to understand how that ends up in close one, especially in the world of software, which is where I've specialized in the last 10 years. It's all got to come. I mean, my job is about taking budget, spending money, and then showing the closed one value, money in our bank accounts. And so I think that's been an appreciation that I've learned a lot. And then I think where, especially the likes of Adobe, the Cantos, maybe the bigger SaaS worlds, is how do you form a relationship with your agency that allows you to be better than your competitors? And I don't know if brand side really understands what that relationship could form. And so I think one of my really uniquenesses, or probably one of my advantages, is the understanding of how to really partner with an agency. And when you get that right, it's amazing the magic you can create.
I'd love to hear your feedback as well, because I've my own opinion on it. But like agencies that are specialists versus like the big five that are really broad, how do you find on the brand side in your experience, what do you think serves you better? Is it go with the niche specialist that's really good in a certain type of vertical, whether it's B2B? Let's use the example of B2B. Going with somebody broad like one of the big five where they have a huge amount of resources and so on. What's your experience in terms of how you see them adding value and working and the ease of working with them?
Caveat, very difficult for me to answer that because I've never worked with the big five.
Okay.
Big enough, but I'll give you my opinion. I think, and then again, on a B2C level where you've got significant size budgets, the big five are the big five for a reason, right? They've got incredible resource, amazing creative outputs, and they're going to deliver something that's, going to be a massive brand shift. There are some incredible examples. I think you and I spoke about it. If you had to go look at a company called Perk, they've done an amazing brand transition, and they would have used one of the bigger agencies. I don't know who they used, but it would have been a bigger one. And when you're doing something at that scale, you need someone with global relevance, global reach, etc. In the more agile world where I work in the startup world, which is, we're a medium-sized business. We have good budgets, but we don't have, huge budgets. You're going to end up using more agile B2B specialized environments. And then what I look for, and so again, this is my strategy. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the right one, but the strategy I've employed is the specialists I brought in-house because I want to know day-to-day what's going on. So your paid specialists, your SEOs, etc. Where I need creative inspiration and strategic campaign help, that's when I go to an agency to get creative thinking, right? So it goes back to your in-house versus out-house strategy. Or agency strategy is sometimes an external partner can think slightly wider than where you are, bring a fresh perspective to things. So like every agency for me has a role to play, a massive role. The big five, maybe one day I'll get to work with them and with big enough budgets. But in my world, we do very tactical stuff that drives almost like the next week type of, or next month outcomes and deliveries. And then specialization, I genuinely like to keep my specialists on a very close watch within my team.
I found the same from working in LinkedIn. I've worked with big five with clients as well, and I think for some of the global stuff, you can see, like what you say, they have a global remit. There's a lot of alignment, but some of the more local indie agencies for something that's very performance led can be really agile and really know the topic really well in terms of the platform and what works and what doesn't and so on. And they're constantly open to testing. Whereas I think bigger agencies, yes, they serve well the client, but there's also the alignment piece within region and so on. So I guess it's a different kind of business model in that sense. I'd love to talk with you a little bit about the category that you're in, which is really exciting. You're one of the leaders in the category, but for people that are unaware of this category of digital assets management, how did it come about? And I know it's essentially a business model in SaaS, but it's a fast growing vertical. I think it's grown at 20%. I saw year on year of the last year. Correct me if I'm wrong. But for the audience that are unaware of it, maybe you could just share a little bit about what it is, the type of functions within an organization you serve, and the value add it brings to businesses as well.
Yeah, sure. So what's interesting is the DAM category, in my opinion, has become foundational technology to any marketing and creative department, creative team that includes agencies. Where it started, it's been around for many years. We were founded 35 years ago. So we're one of the pioneers of the industry of what you call smart DAM technology. And we have continued to pioneer the industry, the category, etc. We are certainly riding the wave of a content explosion. And so for those who don't know what a DAM is, my most basic explanation is think of us as a highly intelligent digital library in the cloud that stores all of your creative content assets. So from PDFs to PowerPoint presentations to JPEGs to videos and everything in between. And so think about a place where you're able to go and store something and then find it really easily. And so where we differentiate ourselves from the likes of Google Drive and SharePoint, where they're more structural file management, we are asset management. And so that at the very basic concept, think about us as that. Where we start to get really clever is finding assets really quickly, the categorization of assets, the storing of different assets in different areas, the ability to share certain assets with certain stakeholders and things like portals and things like that, where you can start curating branded environments for specific stakeholders in your organization or customers becomes very powerful. We take it another level above that. You start thinking about automation of assets into your digital platforms like social, e-commerce, etc. Talk about automation. How do you ensure the campaigns go up at a certain time, come down at a certain time, etc. Another layer that is becoming more and more critical as content becomes bigger is digital asset rights management. How do you ensure at scale that you're using images that are allowed to be used in certain geographies, time periods for certain products? We have really interesting niche environments where we work with a lot of sports teams or brands that are sponsoring things and think about new kits coming out or new brand sponsorship deals being made. How do you automatically bring down everything with legacy stuff and make sure the new stuff is there? And then, some advancements we're making are things like our DAM for products, where we work really closely with retail and manufacturing, CPG, e-commerce companies that have hundreds of thousands of assets. How do you ensure that your DAM then, so your marketers then have access to product information sitting within the assets? What does that mean? It's fascinating. Let's think of any photo shoot that happens. There's actual SKUs, products that are sitting in photo shoots. How do you ensure that you know that specific products sitting out there that is still viable, etc.? Like, how do you start looking for those, right? And so our DAM enables that. And then the last one, which I talk about AI, and again, we've got AI immersed across the whole product, but the other one that's interesting is how do you then start doing automated brand templating? If you think of point of sale stuff in different locations, how do you, at the click of a button, create multiple versions thereof within the brand guidelines that your brand team's created? That starts to do the work, very menial work that humans would do. We can now do that within the world of DAM and then store them within geographical folders or portals, etc. So, and then again, bringing in the governance and guidance. How do we have guidelines and sign off procedures and protocols in place as well? So if you think of it as the library, and then think of all the kind of advanced features we've brought in, we start to become a critical foundational tool to store, very valuable content assets that you've spent a fair amount of, big investments creating.
And it's so broad as well. I imagine, like, even from if you're an e-commerce brand and you're running kind of dynamic creative or anything like that, like the assets amounts must be huge in terms of doing that efficiently and doing it inefficiently. If you measure it, it must be a huge uplift overall for the business when it's done right using a platform like Canto.
So if you don't have a platform like Canto, I often wonder how on earth you're doing it. And so when I meet people at events and I get to talk to our customers, etc., if you're a brand that's growing and you're more than 50 people, I take my hat off to individuals who've structured things like Google Drive or SharePoint to make it work. It becomes very, very difficult. The interesting thing where we see such a basic request or requirement is the wasted time just looking for assets within your own repository is significant. From a cost perspective and time to market value perspective, and the other one is creative burnout.
Yeah.
Creatives are doing menial tasks when they should be in creative. It's amazing the impact that has. And then the other one is, there's nothing worse than going to markets at speed with a logo that's incorrect, with imagery that isn't part of your brand guidelines, etc. There's far more sinister things that can happen as well. But when you scale and with this massive explosion of content, you need foundational technology to harness that rather than be fighting against it, right? And so those very obvious things start to really rack up, and it's amazing the damage and cost that has, often hidden cost that has in organizations and agencies.
Yeah, no, I can imagine it's huge. One other thing as well is, like, with the rise of AI now and some of the tools that can, say, replicate images that are actual brand assets, do you see that there's an opportunity there then for brands that are using, say, platforms like Cantos, whereby they basically authenticate that actually these assets are ours, and whether that's by, I don't know, some kind of, maybe not a watermark is a bad example, but like some way to say, like, whatever is out on the internet, these are authentically our brand assets, but anything else that's done with AI or AI slop is actually it's a invalid replica or a fake or whatever. Is that a trend that you see kind of emerging over the next few years?
Not emerging, it's here. So from a DAM perspective, you would ingest assets that you've purchased, created, had a photo shoot done, so they're your assets. The multiplication or the scaling of those or templating of those would be done within assets already approved. And so again, there's a governance in there that is critical when you go to market. There's also rights management. So not only is there, you got to be very careful of utilizing assets that aren't yours, that are not fit for purpose, etc. But you've also got to make sure the ones you have done, there's model rights usages, there is all sorts of different things, right? That you've got to be careful of. Not DAM will manage that for you. The question you have around when you start using external tools, if you're Googling or whatever you're doing, you need to be very, very careful of where images have come from and who owns them and who doesn't own them. And so creative content generative tools that deliver, content, I would be wary of any brands using it without governance. That needs to be very carefully looked at. And so there are actually multiple organizations that look at rights management, authenticity, things like deep fakes and things like that. That's a huge challenge and topic right now. It's certainly not emerging. It's very much here. But I do believe a DAM, again, foundational technology allows you to ensure that there's a level of governance and peace of mind that the assets you're using are yours, are on brand, any legislation, etc.
I'd love to talk a little bit about in terms of how you look at from your role as a VP of demand generation globally at Canto. How do you look at that when you're like, say, growing the audience base, like you're doing out your plan for the year? What are the kind of key drivers that you look at for that are going to drive growth for the business, whether that's with existing accounts or whether that's bringing on new users? Like, how do you think about that and planning in terms of what I have and what I'm going to use in order to drive that top line?
It's a great question because it's very top of mind and topical at the moment. We have invested a significant amount of money in AI tools within our MarTech stack. My belief strongly is that we need to be more intelligent than our competitors. And so a lot of the work I'm doing is not actually driving volume. We've got good volume coming in of interest and MQLs and hand raises. What I'm looking at is how does AI and data allow us to be more intelligent in our engagements with multiple thousands of different people and offer a more personalized engagement where we can offer value. And so in some ways, it goes back to my original comment on agencies and stand out creative content. I believe we need to be better with what we're currently doing, that we engage with people at the right time with the right message that's going to offer value to them. We obviously would like as much as possible, but I think what we tend to do in the world of B2B and SaaS, especially in this kind of like scale up environment, is we just try and hammer volume. And I don't know if volume is the game right now. I think these tools allow us to be very intelligent, understand where people are in their buying journey, what it is they actually need, so we resonate with the value for them rather than just trying to shove things down their throat. We have substantial value to offer. It's my job to ensure that we are engaging at the right elevation at the right time and to be very clear on the value we can offer at a certain stage of the buying cycle.
With those AI tools that you mentioned, anything specifically that you found? I know that like we're in kind of like a trend at the moment of like, probably 7-8 years ago, it was all about growth marketing and growth hacking and the different tools. And then before that, it was like kind of digital media, probably maybe 15 years ago and so on, and the rise of social media. And now the big theme is around kind of like GTM engineering. You've probably come across this as well, like tools like Clay and how, you can do data enrichment and workflows and so on. But from your perspective, I'd just love to hear in terms of how have you had much success with those kind of like workflows in terms of enrichment of like kind of data sets, meeting the customer where they are? Or is it actually, the more you talk to customers, the more you find out these things, and there's not really a need necessarily to jump on like the GTM engineering kind of bandwagon. It's like the more valuable information is like when you just talk to customers more. I'd love to get your perspective.
I have definitely jumped on the GTM engineering kind of backdrop. We're all in. So I love talking to customers. I'm lucky in Canto. I have free reign to engage at the coalface in sales calls. A lot of the time, because I've bought dams, I've implemented dams. And so if there's an agency prospect, I like make sure I'm there to chat. It's great. It's always good to also kind of reminisce of my days and resonate with them. The problem there is that we need to do that at scale, right? And so I can't get to talk to every customer that's just impossible. We have over 4,500 customers. It's an impossible task to talk to all of them. When you do, we always learn stuff. It's great. And hence I'm often at events to speak to prospects and engage and understand what's going on. What the kind of go-to-market demand gen engineering platforms have allowed us to do. And I think AI is, we're on the precipice of making significant advancements with AI. Hence why I'm saying, how am I more intelligent than my competitors, is how do we aggregate all the information we're getting into? There's so much information and so much data from, your CMS to things like review platforms, G2, to HubSpot Breeze, to your web data and traffic, to things like Gong calls and engagements with customers. How are we bringing that all into a central space to understand what that sum of all the inputs actually, what intelligence are we getting it rather than piecemeal?
Yeah.
My big move this year is that we want to shift away that AI is very tactical in silos in our organization, and that we're actually using AI aggregation tools to bring it all together, and then to start making some very smart assessments at scale around where people are in their journey, what cohorts look better, what don't, and we can start making better judgment calls within a scaling environment. I think the big shift for me is it's AI driven, but how is technology shifting from very tactical implementation to a strategic one? And we're on that journey at the moment. The one thing we haven't mentioned that sits inside all of this is how do we start balancing out what we term brand versus demand? Because if we're only looking at demand, which is my world, we start scraping the bottom of the barrel. And then that kind of 5% who are looking to buy, I believe there's going to be a resurgence of brand, or there is a resurgence of brand. And again, that brings back into your world of agencies again. And, and where do we start breaking through and your brand starts to resonate at a kind of top of funnel perspective.
That's an interesting point you raise as well. Like, how do you see, especially in the B2B world as well, I think the big challenge that a lot of people face is, every company to most have quarterly targets. And you can see that like a customer journey doesn't always align with those quarterly targets. It's not always 3 months. It'd be great if everything worked like that. But
totally right.
How do you see it balancing that thing from like using or looking at kind of leading indicators of like, okay, look, we know that there's a value in the brand play, but we also know that what we do now, we may not be able to see any impact from about 6 to 9 months down the line. But we also have to manage the internal expectations of delivery, of pipeline, of close win deals every quarter in order to justify the investment in the brand. From your perspective, how do you manage that and like any particular kind of leading indicators you look at that kind of goes, okay, look, we're going in the right direction here?
Very good point. I actually met with an old colleague of mine on Friday. They've gone through a massive brand drive, and I asked exactly that question, like, how are you justifying the investment to the board to make sure that there's continued investment and you don't suddenly fall back? My answer is a slightly longer one. There's got to be a level of consistency. And so I think you create what you call this book of business. We can't close things within 60 days. Like, I think that's unrealistic, although we'd love that to happen. But again, so a couple of things, and I'll get back to leading indicators in a second, is understanding where people are on their journey. If someone's just starting out and they kind of in this research phase, well, then hammering them with, book a demo, free trial, that type of stuff, it's just not going to work, right? It's going to push them away. But if we can start through brand awareness, brand campaigns, strong resonance with your markets, to start, getting people to be pain aware, to start understanding the solution we have can benefit them, and start getting them into our world, then we can start looking at real top of funnel metrics like web traffic, like social media followings, like share of voice within social platforms, etc. Those are lead indicators I keep an eye on. It is interesting because, again, it's always like a balancing act, and while one side's running hot, the other one falls away, and the other way around. We have seen significant increase in our brand traffic. Our web traffic, but a dip in conversions. And so now we start looking at that, right? And going, is the content on the site relevant to what they're looking for? Is it all very bottom of funnel stuff, which means they're like not ready for it yet? So you then start getting that right, and you start realizing your traffic's falling. It's always a balancing act. So leading indicators are always things like web traffic, things like social media engagement, social following. We don't do social listening, but it's another thing you can look at. And then you got to see then how that resonates through things like MQL delivery and hand raises.
No, it makes a lot of sense. I think looking at the broader picture, because that's the way the customer is as well. It's not that they're just, loyal to one channel. People will interact in a multiple different touch points, and obviously they do impact each other. I'd love to talk a little bit about that, to follow up on the brand piece around thought leadership and how you see that in the B2B space. A lot of companies now are kind of leaning into the, say, founder-led kind of content or C-suite-led content, and trying to look at it as a way of like educating the audience, but then also bringing them on a journey. If there's engagement there, then kind of using it as a full funnel approach. Have you tested that, or is it something that you're looking at in 2026?
Well, we're certainly doing it. I've created a few pieces of content that are the VP-led type content. There's a two-prong approach. One is driving content to leverage the very best out of algorithms and SEO, and now LLMs and the likes of ChatGPT, etc. And so that leaves a space for, I believe, highly curated, thoughtful thought leadership pieces. But then I believe you need specialists, right? So I don't think a title makes the big difference. I think people are going, oh, wow, that's a CMO who's written that, whatever it is, it's going to be amazing. It's got to be highly specialized content that delivers value to this, probably the C-suite that are looking at it, right? And so that's the shift we're making. We've almost got three areas, right? We've got, hardworking content that sits on our site that ensures we are maximizing both SEO and visibility, and then tactics within that, like referral platforms and PR. So that's one. You've then got a middle ground of really hardworking tactical pieces that would be your users. Things like finding content, brand strategy, how does DAM work within a brand environment and brand management? And then our third prong is, I'm not quite C-suite, but executives in the company that are putting together very specific pieces of content that are going to resonate within specific areas of a business. And so again, unsurprisingly, I do a lot of agency thought leadership pieces around operational resilience, the future of the commercial model for agencies, the things that I've experienced firsthand that I like to impart my knowledge on, and hopefully it makes sense and is valuable. So I think that has to be very, very specific, very curated, and very pointed.
And I think as well, when people have experience in the space, that comes true. Like, rather than if it's just talking about a topic for the sake of it, I think it resonates better when there's someone who would skin in the game, I think, and it's very obvious then when you see that content.
But the one area that I'm finding fascinating and in a really growing role of importance of this role is creative operations or marketing operations. They're a similar-ish role, but this role that really traffics the process of content generation from concept brief all the way through. That's an area and a topic that we are looking to write more about because it's so critical, and obviously collides with our world of DAM.
It makes sense. Have you tested, or are you looking at creators? I know that it's a topic and a lot of brands are leaning into it, testing. Some have had good results, others are still testing and stuff. About the B2B creators in specific, I don't know if that's something that you've looked at or that's on your radar as well.
From a Canto perspective, we actually hired one, and so it's internal again, and so we have a great content creator, but it's not that it's not that third party kind of outsource, etc. We haven't gone there yet. What we have done is we've got 2 flagship webinars coming up fairly soon. Actually, one is the Future of Digital Content. The other one is our Content Innovation Summit, where we bring in industry leaders, industry content creators that have big opinions of where things are going, not necessarily DAM, but content and creative. And so we've used that kind of association to drive awareness and engagement and registrations to our webinars. And that's been very successful over the last 3 years. And then what is interesting is a lot of our customers who are using content generators, outsourced third-party industry leadership content generators, not to do much of a hard sell again, but DAMs become critical in
as well. I can imagine for
pockets of assets that they can use, brand approved. That, again, so you got to be careful in just outsourcing your brand to someone that goes and creates content on your behalf or endorses you, that they are still using content that is approved, is on brand, the right logos, legislation correct, etc., etc. So we come into there, we associate a lot with that world. We haven't leveraged it in the traditional sense inside my world yet.
It makes sense though. I can see already like there's a very valid use case there for creators as well, working with brands, that you can drive a huge amount of efficiency there if you're using a DAM.
Totally right.
I'd love to hear, Andrew, in terms of the next 12, say 18 months, what's on your radar in terms of like the biggest challenge that you're looking at the moment in the next, say, 12 months? Obviously, you're growing very fast and growth is great, but I guess challenges come with that as well. So what's top of mind for the next, say, 12 months to 18 months for you?
Top of mind is how to look in my role. I mean, I'm a senior executive at Canto, so we've probably got a wider business remit. How do we continue growth, sustainable growth, and retain customers and customer satisfaction, etc. We have a wonderful culture and a strong belief in the product we've created and the good and the positive difference it makes. But that, the proof of that is in the satisfaction of our customers, the utilization of our DAM, and the the fact that we retain our customers at 100%, between 90 and 100% is critical. It's a critical benchmark for us. So what does that look like for me? It means that, I need to make sure that we go after the right customer set that can benefit significantly from DAM implementation and the investment that's made there. And then to also within our customer base, how do we start doing very clever data analysis to ensure that the modules that we have, we can offer those for, deeper and further DAM maturity that allows for even better value and return on investments. And so a lot of my thinking is how do we balance growth with sustainability? And then how do we start looking internally at growth to maximize DAM maturity, DAM investments, and that we take our customers along this journey of mature, sustainable content and production. And we hold hands with this world of AI and AI implementation. And in many ways, it's a partnership in figuring out the best balance of AI and how does an AI-driven product like Canto help in an AI required world and content explosion.
It's a really exciting space to be in. If anyone wants to find out more about the content that you share, I know that you're quite active as well in terms of events. I think you spoke, did you, at De Mexico in Cologne?
I did, yeah.
And if anyone wants to find out more about Canto as well, where are you most active, and any events coming up, anything else that the audience might be interested in that want to find out more?
Sure. I haven't taken a back seat, but the first half of the year I'm doing less event talking than I have in a long time. I'm lucky I get to speak at De Mexico every year, and it's one of my favorites European conferences. If you want to find me, please find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I am very quick to answer direct messages and things like that. If you're an agency who wants to talk to me, like I will jump at any opportunity to talk to an agency. It's almost my paying it back for the years I spent there, and I scarp it over to the brand side. And so if you ever want to have a chat about commercials and some of my experience and some tough learnings I had, please just look me up on LinkedIn and say, hey, I heard you on this podcast and let's chat. You will have my attention. And then I encourage you to go to the Canto site. We have the State of the Future of Digital Content webinar with some amazing speakers lined up next week. I can't remember, Marcus, if we've given you the actual report. We do a research report every year on a good split between our customers and non-customers around what they're seeing. And so it's a really wonderful trend report on what's happening in the world of content. Very, very useful. And then the Content Innovation Summit, we're in the beginning phases of planning, but we've had some amazing speakers in the past. HubSpot speakers, I've gone blank on Scott Brinker is always a firm favorite. There's multiple others. That's such a great webinar, pre-webinar or program. It's like 3 hours long, really great content, some good breakout areas. I generally run the agency breakout. We'll have content operations. We've got Rutgers University in New York joining us this year as a partner or as a breakout partner. So we're doing great. We're doing great content things. I think there's lots to learn.
The event that you mentioned, when is that taking place? In the next few months, is it?
Next week, Thursday, is the Future of Digital.
Okay. All right. We will we'll put it on the show notes. I guess if people sign up, they'll be able to see it. If they replay, the show probably won't go out for another couple of weeks, but we'll put it up so that people can see the replay on it as well.
Great. And then the Content Innovation Summit happens in middle of April. I think we're about to lock down the actual day, but it's somewhere around the 17th of April. And it's always a great event. We generally have about 2,500 people registering and about 1,600 attending live. So
Great. And that's online, is it? It's hybrid, or it's all online?
So it's live online. It's global. It kicks off at 4:00 in the UK, 5:00 CST. Yeah, it's an event that's grown magnificently in the last 3 years, which is great.
Great. We'll also put the link on it as well for people to connect. Andrew, it was great talking with you. I learned a ton, and thanks again for joining us on the show.
Marcus, thanks for having me. It was great. I hope there was some good stuff there.
There was plenty. Thanks a lot.
Cheers.
Great having you on.